good morning, I guess, if you are joining us from, the other part of the world. And good afternoon for those of you who might be joining us from, I think, in Europe or in some other parts in Asia. So welcome again to the Transformative Humanities series. It's a talk series being organized by Faculty of Humanities, Chiang Universities. And this is the third time already. And, in this third session, I have invited Professor David Blundell from, Professor David is actually from now as the UCLA, but he's now based in Taiwan. Is that right, Dr.
Yes.
David? Okay.
I am on the east coast of Taiwan.
East coast of Taiwan, but he's planning to go back to to the US. I think sometimes the next few months, if I'm correct, if I'm not wrong. So the title today has been adjusted a little bit after I talked to Professor David last few weeks. So you might notice some of the new keywords that appear in the current one, which I believe is the visual anthropologies and spatial humanities. I will leave Professor Blundell to explain this kind of two keywords in a little while. But before I do that, I would like to introduce another person who joined us today, Dr. Amnoyporn Gitpoma from our Department of Philosophy and Religion, Chiang Mai Universities as well. Dr. Amnoyporn will join us after Professor Blundell's presentation is finished to help lead the Q&A and discussion session. Just a quick kind of bio of Dr. Amnoyporn. She has been working in the South Asia area, especially kind of religious communities, if I'm correct with the expertise of Dr. Amnoyporn. But I will let Dr. Amnoyporn explain so later. So I think it's just about time now that we can start. I think Professor Blundell have a lot of pictures and slides to show us. So without further ado, I'm going to give this stage to David to start the presentations. Okay, David, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Ajahn Pasu. I'm really excited about coming here to Chiang Mai and being part of this series for the Transformative Humanities. And I am working in this for some years now through my unit in Berkeley, through the Electronic Cultural Atlas Initiative, and another unit that I established in Taiwan for Spatial Humanities. So I'm going to start here. And I'm going to talk about Monsoon Asia observed through historical, geographic information systems mapping, visual anthropology, and spatial humanities. So let's see if this goes to the next. There we are. So my work is interactive with localized community-based integrity, and my methods are taken from the Anthropology toolbox. So visual anthropology contextualizes the study of humans utilizing media tools for understanding social and cultural systems in depth. This is called ethnography. It relies on human aesthetics and belief systems visualized, as I will explain in my work here. From the background that I have from Gregory Bates and Margaret Mead, who have visually documented people in Bali through the innovative use of sequential photographs and motion picture formats. So in this early work that they have done from the 1930s and 40s, they have produced multiple layers of documented social and ritual behaviors published in numerous photographs arranged to illustrate behavioral development, such as child rearing, acculturation, ritual transpossession, cockfighting, and especially teaching children movements in dance by passively interacting with masters of performance methods. So this is an example of a teacher and his apprentice student learning dance through passive interaction with the teacher. All this has been documented, ritual behavior and their patterns, by Gregory Bateson and Margaret Mead. So what they have done is they have created a thematic array of images in multimedia, and they have initiated methods in those fields of visual and aesthetic anthropology as multimedia to explore character and personality formation within a society. Examples are given through photography and film, presented in cultural kinesthetic movement, and new research methods that they established to illustrate virtual reality in terms of individual, cultural, not only the questions on how we can understand issues of identity and traditions in a rapidly changing globalized cultural landscape, but also how we can experience culture and geography through a malleable, immersive, non-linear narrative. So anthropology is the field that I work in, and one of our teachers, and Clifford Geertz, has introduced art as a cultural system as a way to illustrate a guiding factor in defining ethnicity and collective human identity. And this contributes to culture as an educational process, as in the methods of documenting Balinese character. Another example is the visual anthropology study in 1966 of the Navajo as they filmed themselves. And this was introduced by giving them technical skills of using motion picture to film and edit short stories about their own Navajo way of life. The Navajo Nation shares the states of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. And you can see where it's located on this map here. And in the center, it's about 25,000 square miles they occupy, and then the Hopi are in the middle, embedded there. And then the Navajo are also in other parts of New Mexico. So the Navajo film themselves began with Sol Worth and John Adair giving film equipment to Navajo at Pine Springs, and they decided they're going to film how they view themselves. So I think I can show this here. So this is a clip of how the Navajo, they loaded their cameras, they used light meters, they used the equipment. For the first time, they've never used film before, and they were able to photograph their way of life and what was important to them. And then they edited their films. Now, in my own research, I have followed this technique in Sri Lanka. I will talk about that later. And what is interesting is that not only were they able to film and edit, they were able to produce something of importance that represented their way of life and their aesthetic sensibility. So the short films include The Intrepid Shadows, The Navajo Weaver, The Spirit of the Navajo, Old Antelope Lake, and The Navajo Silversmith. And these projects gradually empowered people to film and present themselves. The films were intuitive, showing daily life to spirit encounters, a turning wheel in a landscape, silver craft, healing with herbs, chanting, sand painting. The essential Navajo aesthetic system came across, presenting a local sense of being. And the films are archived in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And I'm going to try to show you a clip from this film. It's called The Intrepid Shadows, and I'm going to show that. So this was in Pine Springs, Arizona, and photographed and edited entirely by the filmmaker whose name appears in the film title. And this is used for each of the films that was made. And this was recently posted on the internet that I was able to find, The Intrepid Shadows, with a soundtrack, a poem by Lota Leona. And this is new, and it was posted for the people who were demonstrating for Black Lives Matters in Oregon. So Alfred Klaw, he made this film, and he shows in the film the spirit, the intruder, Johnny Nelson, and the spirit comes as having a sense of how this is the spirit here coming in through the landscape. So they have an encounter. So the intruder is coming to the landscape.
Wheels, wheeling around and round and around. Rusty shadows pushing outwards and bursting into spin, leaving nothing but motion and time. The wheel belt traveling into circles, letting its shadows marking a black highway between its wet wheels. Around and around the wheel, and the belt spins, and the shadows spin. The wheel nursing the treetops with little break a puzzle of black shadows dancing underneath it. Dance and dance of little pebbles as black shadows dance. I see big rock partially black and partially black. Make my eyes recall of the town's chaos, blaze and occupied arcade dancing in the moon and singing ancient glory. On the ground, I think intrepid shadows.
I'm going to stop here. You will see it as the wheel, and then this one, Yebuche, the spirit will show up and have this encounter. So you have the nature, the wheel, the man, and the spirit, Yebuche, showing up. And what is important is if this was a documentary made by anthropologists, they would not make it in this way to show Navajo culture. So the Navajo made it themselves in this way. So, so the study of aesthetics is applied to anthropology in terms of language, biology, prehistory, culture, and to look at the social and cultural systems that permeate life's values in depth. So this is the field that I study. And another of my teachers, Ron and Don Runstrom, produced a project on filming Japanese tea. And this is the first film where a tea hostess actually produced and made the storyboard. And these are the notes, recording, ethnographic notation, and the film description in this module. And it's called The Japanese Tea Ritual Aesthetics, the Way and the Path. And the path is the film. And so this is the tea house, and it was made folding so they could film from different angles and perspectives. And in the tea house, they found actually the action of the people produced characters that had meaning, characteristics, like the path. So the path, the character for the path is this one here in the middle of the book. It's called the Do, or the Tao, and it means the way or the path. Okay, so they organized this film, serving of tea, through the process of framing, resulting from photographs of the tea master, was interviewed again as a meaning and the order of the pictures to produce the film. And it laid out the framing of the symbolism, illustrating silence, yet procedural action and cultural dimensions occurring in the ritual process. Visual anthropology and multimedia juxtaposed with local people and their stories add personal endeavors into the matrix of societies beyond standard documentaries. In this way, in-depth patterns of culture seem to emerge unexpectedly on their own. Sensing and making sense of other cultures emphasizes the practical and open-ended nature of the discussion that comes from new directions and questions for research. So where did I start? Okay, so in the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to show you my own projects here. And it begins with the Sinhalese belief system that I did based on this model of research in film, that was designed through talking with the participants and producing with them a presentation that we could stage to the public. And then from the public, we got feedback. And then we continued making other films in this pattern. Again, the wheel. And this clip I'm going to show you is in the film. This film was produced by a Buddhist monk. He was born in the early 20th century, and he had never seen film. He was ordained in 1919, and he had heard of cinema, and yet he was able to direct and produce the film, and it was edited in the temple by the monks there. And we'll see if this plays.
Meditation is the tool for contemplation. It's one kind of ideal Buddhist life to live in the forest in an isolated place and meditate. The ideal is a dream, a forest existence away from the town. The monk goes to the forest to find peace in himself. The inner peace of the self has the secret of enlightenment. The physical form of the religion can only serve as the channel to the heart of detached existence, the essence of our salvation. Self-knowing starts with concentration of the inner light reflected from the rhythm of an external object. There is developed concentration in the rhyme until the rhythm falls away. We believe in mental culture as the world is arranged according to our thoughts. If we reach the inner self by the process of concentration and mindfulness to every action, we will become aware to the whole universe. Otherwise, we hold on to the smallest fragments as truth.
Here he has come to a forest kuti, a place of meditation with his friend.
The meditation monk serving in this temple has his own environment for his teachings. The community people practice the ideal on full moon days.
So I did that as a student in my 20s, and then I started teaching in Taiwan in my 30s and 40s. By that time, I was able to start spatial humanities projects, and through geographic information systems at South Hall School of Information in Berkeley. So these projects are about understanding sources, linkages, and mutual ways of life. And we produced this book recently on big data in computational social science and humanities. So what is the worth and value of heritage connections? We find peoples have separate yet related traditions that include palm leaf and rattan weaving, pottery, metalworking, jewelry, batik, and constructing ships, wood and stone carving, and other innumerable crafts for domestic utility and for trade. So these are some of the tools that we use in our research and how we use social science data within this geospatial area of Monsoon Asia, and using the GIS points of locations for migration and historical trade routes, religious sites, and the region, how it's linked to peoples, to enriched attribute spatial information through history. So it's a time map. So the use of Google Earth, maritime archaeology. This is a site off the coast of Sri Lanka. It was a shipment of iron that was being transported from Europe to China in the 2nd century and shipwrecked off the coast of Sri Lanka. So this is interesting. All these we have located in our atlas, and observing virtual reality using 360 surround immersive techniques. So here I will explain a little bit more about this later. With my colleagues, we have devised this surround 360-degree camera viewing with compositions about Taiwan in this case, thus giving the viewer a perspective within the action of each scene, and then the viewer will able to then speak to what he is viewing or she can see through this immersive environment, landscapes, for example, and then perhaps the viewer will say something from a childhood perspective, viewing those landscapes. And then all these stories or the narrations in different languages then will be immersed into the space. And this is a survey by remote sensing. This is Angkor Wat. And if we go by remote sensing, actually we find that's in the forested area around the temple, it is quite complex. It was housing thousands of people's little cottages and having a workforce to maintain the temple around it, surrounding it. Okay, time-enabled maps, we do linguistic maps. And for example, this was done by Paul Lee, and it was converted a GIS vectored map by Academia Sinica at the Computing Center to show how languages in the past 300 years with people just within Taiwan migrated to where the languages in Taiwan are located today. And map overlays, this is using, again, Google Earth, and then we put historical maps of kingdoms and where those maps, historical maps, can be put in like a mosaic, showing, in this case, trade routes in the Chola of about 1,000 years ago. And then each of those icons goes into the information about that data within that space. Early maps, this happens to be Taiwan, the Chinese map. And of course, the trade winds are important by season for sailing across the Indian Ocean, especially, and the South China Sea. And they made trade predictable and profitable in accordance with the winds and annual shift of direction that mark the calendar for ocean shipments. And of course, this is before there was a Suez Canal, just trade winds. And here you can see the winds. I don't know if you can see my marker here. This is the Bay of Bengal. And there's the wind that comes out of here, seasonal winds. So they're in the autumn and spring winds, and then they turn around. So there's one direction coming out here to Taiwan, for example, and then the winds will change and then come back to Champa in Vietnam. And so this shows the wind patterns and the kingdoms of about 1,000 years ago, and how they were utilized. Okay, so the Asia Pacific Spatial Temporal Institute was established in Taiwan at my campus there. And I was able to get a grant given by the President's Office to make it the top university project in digital humanities for facilitating capacity building and innovative ways of sharing information by digital methods for visualizing spatial temporal aspects of human experience. And I'm going to show you at this place a one minute clip of our institute. This is the campus and our institute located. Some of our members here, our classroom, and we're documenting religion and how it's related to ancient artifacts, Buddhist and Taoist. And part of our research is cemeteries and documentation content. Beetle nut, bidang. And this is our logo for the Institute. So, so the aim is, for example, the 360-degree virtual reality documentary exploring questions of identity and multi-ethnic environment of Taiwan, the connection to perception, tradition, environment, globalization, as well as how these in turn characterize culture in Taiwan as distinct in the region. And this is an early map. So we use maps and we use images. And we start with analog photography and go into virtual reality through an immersive interactive environment. And the result is revealing image status, virtual and or textual accounts of from the imagined state of people giving a sense of self-worth and place in the social context or their natural environment. As this illustrates here. And our current Taiwan project promotes innovative media of aesthetics and ethnography. It uses both the analog and digital methods to explore aesthetics. So we can use old film format and new films. And we look at the social, physical, and the humanities, and how, and ask what are the determinants of people within their context. And the Taiwanese therefore share their stories juxtaposed with their own history, heritage, and expectations for life. So despite the pressures of the past and present, Taiwan populations continue to redefine how to position themselves on personal, communal, ethnic, and national levels in ways that are difficult to categorize and to holistically comprehend. The virtual reality framework presented here is to provide a multi-dimensional experience of Taiwanese diversities, which captivates and transports the viewer into a subtle yet heightened awareness of nuances between people, location, and tradition. This experience is meant to contextualize how one can understand Taiwan in terms of the people, culture, diversity, and landscape of both viewer and participant. So then we come to the virtual reality platform for this that will also include a focus on voices, songs, dance, story, personal and narrative, language, right, and landscape in various locations throughout Taiwan as we bring this to shopping centers, supermarkets, museums, any place. This is a portable system where we can present the circular composition for people to interact. So this platform thus activates the viewers to enter and allows them to engage the subject matter in a unique individualized experience of people and place. It not only questions how we can understand issues of identity and traditions in a rapidly changing globalized cultural landscape, but also how one can experience local culture and geography through a malleable, immersive, nonlinear mosaic narrative. Such an immersive documentary explores how various cultures and subcultures incorporate circular motifs in their traditions in a type of viewer experience that activates the role of the audience as a central participant. So my colleague Richard Cornelius is the artist. I am the anthropologist in the project. And the results are the ethnographic interactive platforms that gives this uniquely individualized experience of the people and their place. This is our device. And this is one of the 360 degrees of a temple in Sancha. And this is how it is operated. And so we have examples of weaving stories. This is a story actually that's by Nandolan. She wove a story, and in each pattern in the weave tells something of a story of the heritage and lineage of the Taroko people. And we work on pilgrimage. This is at the Museum of World Religions. And to enter the museum, they have a waterfall. You can see here. These are my students coming in. So now we come to Monsoon, Asia, and this is taken from Kuala Lumpur. It is a map that I found interesting because it shows the whole region of the Monsoon, Asia, and also, if you can remember, Malaysian Airlines lost a flight somewhere, and so now on this board, this is called their Transportation Media Board, you can see where every flight and its flight number located in real time in the sky. This is something that all the public now can see, where planes and how many planes and where they're going at what time and the weather conditions. Okay, so now we're coming back to old maps. This is the Dutch 17th century first map of Taiwan. And we're going to look at the diversity of peoples. Of course, landing in Taiwan, it has over 200 peaks over 3,000 meters, and snow-covered, sort of not this much snow now, but maybe last month or so, and that lakes. And we saw this one. This is our mapping of the languages, and this is our people, the diversity of Taiwan. There are some 27 language groups in Taiwan, the Formosan languages, and about 16 of those languages are used in daily life and in diversity. So we look at how people appeared before, then, and now, and the legacy of their aesthetic systems. This is an indigenous poster composition of peoples and their place and how they perceive themselves and how they change. For example, the suit changes in a century, shows on the left-hand side, the indigenous, the Paiwan traditional vest, and from the vestment went to a business suit within a century. And the old Paiwan ancestor totem, and this one here, the new with the laser component to a slate ancestor totem. and the old tattoo system and now. So there's a continuum, but we can see it. There's a lot of 3D. So when you walk around in where I live in Hualien, there's a lot of 3D, and it shows where people live. For example, on trains, they see themselves here as the images of the Buddha on a railway car, and Taoist incarnations of Buddha, love signs, beliefs in nature, the monsoon and typhoon systems. And we get hit. You can see the east coast of Taiwan is the place that's hit. And also east coast of Taiwan is the place where the Earth lithosphere plate is being uplifted. And there was an earthquake about 3 years ago. This is a monument to show the lithosphere fault and layers of rock all the way up to the surface. And this is the fault line of the rock in the sculpture. Okay, we look at archaeological cultures through time. And before Taiwan is an island, people walked in. And so you can see here, Taiwan is here, and this light area, actually 15,000 years ago, this was the continental shelf, East Asia here. And so people could walk to Taiwan, the Philippines, and all this region here. And this was called the Sunda Shelf. This was a subcontinent at that time. And so the east coast of Taiwan actually represents was the east, you can see the east shore of Asia at its time in the Ice Age. And the caves are there with lots of evidence of the Paleolithic people, and their stone tools are there. So people came out sailing from river estuaries to the sea coast, and they got to the coast of Taiwan. And they started, excuse me, about 6,000 years ago on Neolithic cultures. You can see here, and they traded. So by the 9th to the 13th century, they were trading out iron ore. Excuse me. So why not bring out the historical story with digital humanities tools to circulate among peoples of all walks of life, of all ages? Thus could entertain and explore the data with the public to find new possibilities and understanding history from the grassroots, and people to learn about themselves with the range of applications, and not simply to be told the stories from the top down. So we find linkages with ship navigation routes. We make timelines. We follow the season. We follow the wind. They follow the estuary, the ports, the voyaging of merchants and monks, early historical stories, and map archaeological sites. And the research question: to what extent did religious systems and related motifs and symbols spread across networks of monsoon Indo-Pacific regions? Did this occur in part through Austronesian voyaging? So we have found that Taiwan had voyaging out from perhaps 4,000 to 3,000 years ago, and to the Philippines and out into the Pacific, and to Sulawesi and Sumatra into the Indian Ocean. And it went in stages. So by 3,500 years ago, this language family we call Austronesian was being incubated in Sulawesi, incubated again in Sumatra, and with each stage it incubated. And it's a language of family of about 1,200 individual languages throughout the Indo-Pacific region. Okay, so our theme is based on merchants and monks commissioned Austronesian speakers for navigating and sailing their sea craft of wood plank, hull, lash, and stitched together without rigor across the Bengal and the Andaman Sea, Indian Ocean. And we are charting and finding these through ancient maps. This is Mr. Wei Dilwen, who helps us with the ancient maps. And we look at old maps. This is from Ptolemy here, a map here, and published in 1855. And down here is the map of Monsoon Asia. In fact, there's Sri Lanka, India, and Thailand, Malaysia, and China, all in this map. That is from the 150 in the Common Era, and republished here. And so it was really the map Ptolemy that people were using since then. And so we have the land of Ganga Islands in China. And another kind of map is this, Buddha, Mara, and the goddess of Ganga, showing from this map, you see the Ganga, the region of Ganga is the river system. The greater and extra Ganga is Southeast Asia, and how the goddess of the river is, with her totem, the crocodile, are managing people who are in a battle with Mara, as the Buddha sits on the top, peacefully protected under the bo tree, going for his awakening. And we map, this is the ancient Dutch fort in Taiwan, Zealandia. That is where the Dutch created the first global pharmacy as a forum for the exchange of content and knowledge. So we look at navigation, and now what? This is, of course, something from Star Trek and the future. So we look at time-enabled map displays and produce modules that focus on areas and themes that link GIS maps, providing a spatial temporal index, and users can browse maps and view multimedia materials, providing cultural temporal space that they can contextualize in. This is school children producing a mural voyaging out of Taiwan, crossing the ocean. This is making a boat and documenting how boats were made. This is an Orchid Island here, up here, and made of 27 pieces of breadfruit tree. And now we voyage from there to the Batanes Islands down here, and as we voyage, we come to this island Ibayat. And when you come to Ibayat, that's just an uplift coral reef, and then you have to climb up on the reef, and hopefully you can get a taxi to take you into the town, and then up to the top of this island is full of sherds that we have dated back 4,500 years, all coming out of Taiwan, images, pieces of jade, slate, and pottery. And this island has only limestone and coral. So all this material that we find all scattered all over this island, like this right on the surface of the island, dating back 4,500 years ago, was all carried in and worked from Taiwan into a workshop and making trade items to trade out. So our partner is, especially my Berkeley-based Electronic Cultural Atlas initiative, and we hope that we can invite you to come and share and an expanse of our data, layers, and time across space, providing everyone with new tools to advance humanistic inquiry. So this is, you can go to the website of the Electronic Cultural Atlas initiative, and there we can partner. And for more than 20 years, I've been working with my teacher, Lou Lancaster, and he has created a new project called the Atlas of Maritime Buddhism. And so these are the places we have researched already. and putting into the atlas that will be launched in Taiwan at the Kaohsiung Foguanshan Museum as a complete immersive presentation of the historical development of Buddhism in Monsoon Asia. So we use images like this early image of Buddhism, where there's a seat and the bo tree, and behind it the sun or a star. And then we look at these mutual traits and observe legends, beliefs, architecture, songs, and how the ocean craft and voyaging techniques through languages that we have studied here to piece together those traits and transferred and their aesthetic systems across the Monsoon area, especially at these points that we have mapped here. And then we come to Sri Lanka and the port of, this is the Gaul, and how beliefs were circulated by ships. The carrying of Sangamati Thera, first bow tree carried from Ashoka to Lanka, planted at Anuradhapura, and how the mound to a stupa, and the Fascian routes here as he traveled. He's interesting. At the age of 60, he started, in his retirement, he started traveling around the region from 499 to 512. And in those years, he collected a lot of knowledge and information and then made a report so we can track and visualize his journey and his return. And again, these are megalithic sites and Buddhist sites. So the megalithic sites, and a megalith looks like this. This happens to be in Taiwan. This is just a large standing stone or pile of rocks known as a dolem. Those then all became Buddhist sites, and in Sri Lanka and South India. So this slide says published 500 before the Common Era and 500 within a span of 1,000 years, from 500 before the Common Era to 500 after the Common Era. We have in 1,000 years megalithic sites becoming Buddhist sites. Okay, and then of course the appreciation of Meru, Adam's Peak, and the Buddhist footprint at the top, and then how it's then, and also a peak that we can see in architecture in Angkor Wat, and how Meru and the lotus are reappearing in architecture and in paintings, the sun, Meru, flora, and water, and how the routes went through the Indian Ocean and the sailing routes we navigate. This is at Malacca, down to Singapore. And Suvarnadipam Bhumi is the area of Southeast Asia. Srivijaya. So we have mapped the kingdoms. And then we come to Bujang Valley, where I've done my research in Malaysia. And we see the port system. And it's about 1,000 different chandi or influences of Indic architecture that we find in there for traders. So there's a composite map that actually was done by Paul Wheatley in his book. And Bujang, the museum collection, is the first and only archaeological museum in Malaysia. And it's showing the Buddhist images here. This is a piece taken from Borobudur in Indonesia that was transported here. And Buddha images from India. This looks like it's a pot that was made in Austronesian style that we find in Taiwan at the same time. And then we have inscriptions from Buddha Gupta giving thanks for safe passage. And And we can read these. There's also Sinhala script there. The Chandis, over time, we can map them when they were first discovered and how they appear today, and the relic chambers of the Chandi, and increasingly finding jewels and relics. So the last project that I've done is in Indonesia, and I got a grant from Taiwan, the government, to map Buddhism in Indonesia. So here's the Mount Merapi in Jakarta, and it shows again the same system of Meru, the mountain, the peak, the monument, the temple, or the place of worship on the flat, and then down to the ocean. It's from the top to the sea. We find this in Bali, in Sri Lanka, in India. It's repeated throughout the region. So this is it's a live volcano. See here, and just near that volcano, there is a monument called Borobudur. So I asked people before there were monuments in the culture, what did the local people use for like a megalith or a standing stone? They said this hand gesture stands for the mudra of a standing post or monument. And we can see it in a basket of rice and at the top of Borobudur. And it's the largest Buddhist monument in the world, and it's based in Java. And it shows also the ships that carry the merchants, monks, and navigators, and how they sailed and where they sailed. And reproduction of those ships have been made and sailed across the Indian Ocean. They are known in Sri Lanka as the Oru, and they're stitched together. And I'm not going to show this to you now. This is on my website. It's a film clip showing after the tsunami hit Sri Lanka. I made a film about the Sri Lanka Malayu and their stitching of seacraft. And it's here, but I'm going to show you more from Borobudur and showing the outrigger and how these ships were navigated and the pilgrims on the ships. And because now it is in an Islamic country, and yet there is the Buddha. This is outside the wall of a mosque. And I will show you this clip if it plays, because this shows the Buddha and then Ramadan, and then the Muslim people inside and coming in to break their fast for the evening. And I'll show this to you here. And we were invited to break fast there. And so this shows in the map, Indonesia's in 3 time zones, and shows where archaeological sites were located in 2016. And that's when I was doing my research there. And we found in Sulawesi evidence of Buddhism. And this is the map, and this is showing the points Buddhist points here, and they're in estuaries, and where actually there was mining going on. And so we have Buddhist locations here, according to the color code of the map. And especially the evidence of the artifacts, such as bronze images and the Chandi places. And they didn't really understand these images or what was the significance. And I explained this was showing how vast Buddhist civilization had spread through Indonesia. Never happy to know about that and the significance of these monuments that they have found on their landscape. So this is from the 2nd to the 5th century. And so our research goals are to further standards in cartographic strategies through utility of digitization of content and format, giving new possibilities for local and international collaborators. So we have a 3D mapping for projects that could provide new guidance for developing best practice standards and apply to databases, giving interactive multimedia utility aspects. This allows uniting the context of environmental landscapes with cultural data for making new enhanced possibilities in spatial humanities for scholarly results. And despite the pressures of the colonial past and the modern present, local populations continue to redefine how to position themselves on personal, communal, ethnic, national levels in ways that are different and difficult to use, to categorize, and for ways that are difficult, again, to categorize holistic comprehension. So our focus is on heritage as a cultural resource that defines a people's ethos and facilitates consciousness of spatial temporal area to communicate with others, thus defining a sense of place. There we go.
Thank you very much, Professor Vandil, David, for showing us. I think it looks like the overall life projects that you have started for since you were doing this the visual typical visual anthropologies. Before I give this space to Ajahn Amnoyporn to help lead the question, I have just one question to ask David. So earlier on in your slides, you show us about the film cameras that you use in the early days of your career in giving using this as kind of in the field work and allowing the people to kind of film or document their kind of everyday lives and everything. I was wondering, like, because I'm not the anthropologist by training, I was wondering what was the response of the people when they actually see their everyday life through the production of these the images on these technologies? Because you mentioned a lot about the idea of allowing people to see themselves through the reproduction of the images. Either it was this film camera, or even your recent project when you move on towards more the GIS system. So I was wondering what was the experience of people back then when you were earlier in your career.
So I view myself as a coach, and I give the equipment and let people explore on their own with it. And of course, people in a film school will say that's not the right way. You have to go to a film school first. And and these are places without electricity. And so you need, so I started without like video. I could not use that. I had to use film cameras and battery operated because that was the only way we could get batteries. And then for the Navajo project, they used cameras that they could wind up in spring loaded and film in that way. Because again, they don't have electricity there either. So a lot of people in the world, they don't have connectivity to the electronics that we have, that we take for granted every day. So how they felt about viewing themselves, well, they made it for themselves. And like in the monks film that I showed you one clip, then the monks actually cannot see the film because they're forbidden to look at films or entertainment. And so what they did is we staged the screening of the film, the premiere of the film on the temple wall, and all the villagers came and they were there. So the monks were there to supervise because it was in the temple, they could stay in the temple. It was outdoors, they could supervise the people to settle down and all of that. They were sort of, monitoring the viewing of it. And of course they could also view it. And actually they made it. So and then everyone in the village, they could see themselves, they could see them in school, they could see them going to a pilgrimage, they could see their daily life activities. They were happy. So this is, I mean, they did it and they made it and they did the editing and the presentation of it.
Right. Okay. So yes, I'm going to give this role to Dr. Amnoypon to help at least a few questions or discussions after the presentation. Please go ahead.
Very much. Thank you very much, Professor Brandeis. David, can I call it, please?
Just call me David. It's fine.
Yeah, it seems to be easier.
Yeah.
This was a very fascinating and knowledgeable talk, and I think I need more time to digest it since it's like a very big topic. And my background, as you know, is social anthropologist, and we use participant observation. And as you know, you are anthropologists, we have a dilemma of how can we represent the voice of the informants like without bias, because many times we can see that is the opinion of the researcher rather than the voice of the informants. And I think in my point of view, the visual anthropology can touch upon this topic by seeing you give the informants can using the video to narrate their life, to talk about their life, to represent their life to the public. This is the way that we as anthropologists, we can say that this is how they understand their life, and this is how they want to represent their life, to show their life to the public. And one question regarding to the video is that the video that we teach the local to do their filming, to film themselves. I saw from gender perspective, it is fascinating to see women have a tools to film themselves, to represent, to show their life. I think in your video is mostly it's women, if not all women, doing the film. And usually what we always see is like is the story about life is always narrated by men, but the video show that it's by women. Is it because you ask them to be just women, or they just volunteer to work on that?
So that is a film before my time, because that was among the Navajo, 1966, and John Adair, one of my teachers, he related that to answer that question, is that he had like a classroom where he brought in everyone to ask who would be interested in this project. And primarily the women volunteered. But but as you can see, the film by of this Intrepid Shadows, that was made by the man actually who was in the film, but probably relied on the women for their film making, editing, and he sort of directed the film, in that particular film. But both men and women were in the films and made the films.
Thank you very much. So I have 2 points that I would like to ask, or maybe you can explain more for us. You mentioned about like visual anthropology. If you use a lot of tools in representing locals' life, and with this change in terms of technologies, like I remember that when my first year in doing fieldwork in India, the area that I went, I cannot access through Google Map. I have to draw the map myself and try to ask people where is to go to this ashram, how to go there, something like that. And second year when I went there every winter. That village appear in Google Map. I don't need to ask people. I just type and have internet, and I just follow the direction. It will tell me to turn left or turn right, and it will say your destination is on the left, something like this. So this is how it changed in terms of the discipline itself. That I believe that my supervisors still carry on the paper map instead of using mobile phone map. But regarding to this change in terms of technologies, how can we approaching or using how this kind of technology or tools change people's life in terms of anthropology?
As I explained earlier, we take it for granted that people have electricity, for example, or people have internet, or people can use Zoom. So my students at UCLA, of course, they are smarter than I am for all this internet connectivity, Zoom. They'll say, teacher, it's the button down to the left. Teacher, it's the blue button up there. And, and so they're actually coaching me about Zoom within my classroom. And that's good, but I am, grateful for the students, but these are privileged students. They come to a university in the United States and there's high tuition, and they all went to American schools or British schools or private schools, and they come to study in American universities. But if you go to like Chiang Rai and beyond, if you go up to the Thai-Burmese border, China border region with up in Yunnan, and then over down through Laos, in the northeast of Thailand, and all these different places, actually you can find barefoot farmers, and as in Sri Lanka, without having internet and Google Earth and all of that. And primarily, as with the Navajo project, these are the people that would be of interest to me. But with that said, we also live in another layer of culture that is connected with Google Earth, the internet, as you mentioned, and all the tools. So every time I take a photograph with my smartphone, it shows on the phone where the location of the picture the photo is going to locate automatically. And so this is, so actually it's called the digital divide. Some with and some have nots and increasingly we think that there are more people connected, but actually as the population increases, there's less people connected. And I'm sure that you have been to some like slums of the Dalit, the untouchable. In India, there's 200 million people below the caste. They live in very substandard housing, and they don't have electricity, and but they're very, you know, I mean, they're making life as best they can. I work with them as well, and they tell me their stories. But for that, I have to bring in all the equipment and everything. You know, and it's of interest to them because they don't really have that in their daily life. So with my students, because they do have that in their daily life, they can make very nice. One student made a film about homeless people living on the street, one in China, one in Mexico, and different places where homeless live. And they go out and they can interview people on the street. And they know how to do that because they have all the tools and I don't need to teach them. They just use their camera that's on their phone.
Yeah, I totally agree with you that in some part that they cannot access to the tools. But like in case of the tradition that I study, the Vaishnava Sahajya, which is most of the sadhu come from the Dalit lower background. Now, what changed is that they have mobile phone. I think the first year when I went to the field work, I am the photographer, and they're very excited to see the photo, the picture on the phone. But now some sadhu, they have their own smartphone, and they connect to each other through this channel, and they kind of represent themselves to the public without the need of social or of anthropologists to study them. So I think this is another thing that I would like to see how it changed, how life changed in terms of, and the discipline itself changed in terms of the technology and how people, local people or lower people access to the technologies. And the last thing that I would like to bring it up is about mapping. The last project that you did is very, what is it? Historical development of Buddhism in Monsoon, Asia, which is very interesting, and which is I still learning about it actually. And I wonder how, without doing this mapping and navigating like what you see as the trace of Buddhism, of the Buddha in each regions, and it seems that in each region, even though the place is static, but the story in the place through this kind of moving, like the monsoon winds, like it's not static, it's very diverse and dynamic. So
that's very well said. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. I wonder with your with your interpretation of this kind of mapping, and with other who try to study in different way, what the difference between this, like your own way, what you think it can your method can make us seeing the history better, clearer than the other method?
That is a good question. With the work that we're doing, as I tried to illustrate, is a 3D and virtual immersive surround within a story. So this, with your phone as an ordinary person, as you share photos and text, you're not doing that. And so with our group, we're actually working on this more immersive surrounding storytelling that people can actually enter into. I think Nicole has a question, hand raised there.
I was gonna ask if I saw the Nicole raising hand. So go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, actually, and my question's kind of related. I hope you can hear me okay. I was actually thinking about the website that I've seen recently that actually renames, I'm thinking about tension and mapping and representations of like local maps versus colonial maps. And I was thinking about the projects in the United States, for instance, where you can put in your either your zip code or your town name, and it gives you the Native American name. And I was just wondering if you had projects that were kind of seeking to, especially in terms of mapping, just reconcile the local knowledge systems with the colonial knowledge systems. I was also thinking about an example, because you have so many cool projects on the website. I admit that I was on there a little bit during the talk because I was curious. But I was even thinking about an example in Peru where, you know, some of the Spanish economic records were different than the Inca records, where they would record things like economic transactions by knotting ropes. So I was just wondering if you had any examples that came to mind, whether it was with a mapping project or another map where there were just conflicting systems of information and how you represent those digitally?
That is an excellent question. And not only that, but place names. Just to map a single place name through time, perhaps one place has multiple and various place names, like Native American place names or colonial place names that are in the same place, that then have another layer of present day place names, and then how people in daily life refer to those places. And then this is not only a question that we are dealing with, but also the question, as people have these places in multiple languages, as also people move with different languages into different spaces and then give the same place another place name. And yet it's the same place, and there's a continuum of and continuity of the people or the culture, or it moves or it gets transplanted. And then all of this information is in the mix, and it goes through a time map of layers and layers of these place names, and in the story and the perspective and the economics and the people who record, or how we judge that through artifacts, makes it increasingly complex. Therefore,
it seems as though the project is almost never going to be done in any capacity. That, I mean, not like,
yes.
Yeah.
Nicole, that is correct. We've been working on it for 20 years. And so what we have accomplished now, or more, is the Monsoon Asia project called Maritime Buddhism, that is mapped according to all these ports and places. And Professor Lancaster believed when I first met him, that Buddhism could only be transported by land through the Silk Road of Central Asia, and it could not have a maritime component to it, because in South India, they have a Dravidian language system. And he thought you must have a Sanskrit language system to be Buddhist. Then he was taken at a conference in Chennai by Dayalan, the director of the India Archaeological Survey, to Tamil Buddhist temples. Many have been now converted to Hindu temples, shrines that were Buddhist. And then Professor Lancaster could not understand why, if Rome had emptied its treasury to China, why only 17 Roman coins were ever found in China. And then he found hordes of Roman coins at ports that were Buddhist in their time, and then figured out that Buddhism actually was being transported with an economy out of South India, through the Bay of Bengal, up through the South China Sea and to China. And so he calls it the Great Circle, because there's the land route that he believes in, of course, that he started with. And then this new understanding for him is the sea route. But people in Sri Lanka, since I arrived as a student, they always just told me about the sea route. They didn't know about land routes. They only knew that everything was, all of Buddhists coming to Thailand, and the Burmese and the Lao and the Cambodian, all, and Chinese, all got everything, as they believed, from Sri Lanka by navigation. And so that is the theme of this project. And he has made it in such an immersive way that when you enter, you're completely in a surround of voices that could be in Tamil or Malay or Thai or in Khmer or Vietnamese. All these different voices are all telling their different stories about maritime Buddhism. And then if you're overwhelmed by all of that, then you can just say, well, this is my story. and then be part of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, hearing or trying to construct any kind of digital project that took into account that many languages and that many naming systems. So thank you for sharing that experience.
Yeah, then when you step into it, you're immersed. So all this is a virtual reality of which you are immersed in.
Yeah.
And without getting lost.
You know, when you were talking about the documentation of the names of the cities and towns project, we just had this kind of little small debate a few weeks ago about the English name of Chiang Mai province that I live in now. Because in the past, I think it was spelled Chiang Mai as in, you know, just one word. But now in somehow, I think 20 years, this kind of changed into the two separate words. I think probably following the transcription, I think, in the standardization in Thai. But you know, this kind of reflect what you just said about, you know, people living through all this transformation of the names that change, you know, especially geographically and spatially speaking. Yeah.
So what is happening in digital humanities is that we have more information, that's in Nicole's question, that we can possibly ever comprehend in any number of books, papers, articles, and only computational systems can analyze all of these differences and perspectives, but it doesn't merge them into one system. It merges them into separate integrated components of different perspectives, if you can understand that. So there can be a debate on different aspects like slavery in America and what that meant to people who were slaves and people who were masters. So that's so much of a different perspective, right? But then they all became Christian, they all became Americanized, they all became who they are today. And so this is it's this whole business of the transformation of cultures and languages and people within their space, and just as your program is transformational through the humanities, and that is what we are doing.
Thank you, David, for coming up with this very nice, I guess, probably nearly the conclusive kind of statement for this sessions. I think, sorry for interrupting, but I think we are running out of time. So I can just allow one more, I guess, response or comments or question from the audience, or that could be done with one if you still have more questions. Yeah, just one more quick comments, I guess, or questions, if anyone would have.
I mean, I could comment on something just because it picks up exactly with what David was just saying. I worked for a project called the Early Caribbean Digital Archive, and we were trying to develop a TEI schema to capture humans, right? And we wanted to capture like the economic transaction of it as well, but then we were worried about documenting and tagging every time a slave was sold at a market. If we documented that person as a good, are we then, in creating this archive of searchable terms, dehumanizing? So I completely understand the politics of that. And even just, I mean, for us, it was more of a literary archive. So if there would be sometimes different representations of, for instance, a slave narrative that supposedly a slave had penned on their own, but then it would be published within, you know, a white male authored work. So we were also trying to, you know, just pay attention to that and actually like extract the authorial information, even if it was published within another text. So I think a lot of the themes that you're talking about, David, on a much larger scale, because, you know, I was just looking at the Caribbean. I completely am sympathetic to the issues that you've been talking about. And so I enjoyed a lot of what you were raising for us today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nicole.
Yes.
For sharing your...
I have a colleague at UCLA, Robin Butler, who's also working on Caribbean Archives, Huntington Library, and also how animals were observed by early colonialists in the Caribbean.
I have a friend who's doing some work on that, on like pre-Linnaean categorization as well, which is just like, it's such a cool way to, I mean, that was, you know, in different competing systems of like, how do you reconcile these competing systems of taxonomy is another issue that's come up in terms of the animals. But yeah, I don't know. I think that as much as I'm a fan of a lot of DH things, I always have to step back and wonder what's lost in the merging and reconciling of these different systems.
So they were distinct before, and you talk about merging. I think people like to simplify.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. You must keep them distinct and separate in like Aztec, Mayan, Caribbean languages, whatever area that you're working in. And then the layer when there is the colonial layer that comes in, and then the reaction to colonial, and then the independence, let's say, of the region with the people having their own voice. And just like how Chiang Mai as one word became two. And then is it a two-word place name, or is it a one-word place name? So you have to keep them both of them.
Yeah, the Facebook title of our faculties use one word, and when people ask, we come up with this excuse or reason as we try to keep the old tradition. But in fact, in all bureaucratic kind of documents have been using the two words name of the Chiang Mai. And
then there was a name long before Chiang Mai.
Yeah, that's right. Other names as well. Yeah,
yes, that's right.
Nicole is actually based in Chiang Mai. If David happens to come to Chiang Mai next year, I guess.
Yes,
we might be able to kind of connect, I guess.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You can please share my email. It's monsoon@ucla.edu.
Monsoon@ucla.edu. Sure. Okay, I think we're running out of time. Sorry for everyone for interrupting. But thank you very much, Professor David Blundell, for showing us your projects that you have been working on from the early days until a very recently, the very interesting digital humanities and spatial humanities projects. And I guess if David happens to, if we get to travel next year, I mean this year, next year David have to be in Chiang Mai. So of course we might be able to organize something, and we hopefully we can broadcast online on as well. Be doing this hybrid stuff. So before I end these sessions, I like to advertise. So the next session of the Transformative Humanities series next time will happen on 22nd of April, which is after a long Thai New Year Songkran break on the 22nd. The title for next one is How to Build a Time Machine. Not really the actual time machine, but that's it's something on what we call the organizing temporalities and in the Anthropocene. So I guess we're going back to kind of critique of the humanism's kind of approach. That's the next time. And if Professor David, I think you probably have to go back to the US back then, and I'll send you the link just in case you might be
interested. Please, please.
The series.
Thank you, Ajahn Pasut, very much.
Yeah. Sure. And so, yeah.
And I appreciate the interaction and the people in this panel session for having your spending so much time and energy to prepare this and the poster and everything. It's really, really elegant and beautiful. And for Akid Pramang Ajahn, thank you for and all your help with the employee and your teaching assistant and the others who have helped you. And Supon, all of you guys, please accept my Sawadee Kap Kun.
They actually seeing you through another channels, even though the cameras are closed.
Yes, already. All right. Thank you again. Yeah.
Thank you. So I have to thank everyone who attend this session as well. For those and also those who have to leave before the time. So we'll come back again in the next sessions. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, David. So I'll be in touch in the email message after this session, and Ajahn Ampuetwan as well. Thank you so much.
Please do, John Pasut. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, wonderful.